Hello, welcome to Learning to Drum. I'm your host, Adam Tevlin, and we are in week 18, episode 15. Last week, we started solo number 2. We talked about just another way to practice that double stroke roll, which is backwards. Today, we're going to continue with solo number 2 and finish that out. We'll play it all together at 75 beats per minute, which is not at 90, but we want to make sure that everybody can join in, and we'll play the entire solo together. After that is test time. That's right, test time on some things that you should be practicing on. Remember how I said last week, it's like always go back and practice on the stuff that you've already known, and you want to try to get to greater speeds and things like that. Okay, without further ado, we'll go ahead and start at measure 22, which is on the Flam Taps, and this is about mid-section of the solo, number 2. And we're going to start it at 65 beats per minute, which was the same tempo that we had last week. Here we go. 2, 1, and 2, and here we forte in. And we'll stop right there. Okay, so that's at measure 25 where we stopped at. This is pretty self-explanatory. Hopefully it wasn't too hard for you. Now what we're going to do is from that forte, we're going to go up to fortissimo. So I'm going to play the last measure that we played before, which is measure 25, and we're going to keep going, all right, for the next 4 measures. Notice that difference in forte to fortissimo. Not much, but it is a difference. Here we go. Measure 25, oops. 1 and 2, and here we go, and 4, and 1, 3, and 4, and ending on 29. All right. Did you hear the little dynamic contrast between those two dynamics? Now we drop down at measure 30 to pianissimo, from fortissimo down to pianissimo. So there's going to be a difference in the playing. It's going to be a different feel. I'm going to take it from the previous measure on measure 29 so you can hear the fortissimo, and then we're going to get down at measure 30 to the pianissimo, and we're going to play the next 4 measures after that. Here we go. 2, here we go, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and okay, so notice how we're starting our poco a poco crescendo, little by little crescendo. We started at pianissimo, and right about there, might be at a mezzo forte where we stopped at measure 33. Continuing on to the end of the solo. Okay, so now that we've pretty much covered the whole solo, I'm going to go back to that pianissimo section, and I think it'll be wise for us to do that whole section, the whole 8 bars, going from pianissimo up to fortissimo, and let's see how that sounds. 2, 1, 2, pianissimo, play. Oh, no gawk there, no rim shot. When it comes to crescendos, okay, save it into the end. In other words, I'm not going to go through and go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Oh, where are we going to go after that? There's nowhere to go. So I would save it. I think I was a little too liberal that last time we played, and I could have probably saved it a little bit more. So the important thing to remember to effectively play it is to kind of save that crescendo, that last part of the crescendo to the end. I'm going to play that one more time and making sure we get that correct. 2 together, and 1 and 2, and here we go. And So you can see how I waited to the last part of that crescendo to really bring out that fortissimo. All right, now let's go ahead and play the whole thing at 75 beats per minute and see if we can do that. Okay, there we go. 75, 1, 2, 1 and 2, and here we go. And 1, 3, and 4, and 2, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3. And 4, and 1. Ending, oops, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2. Second ending, and forte. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 4 and 1 and 4 There it is. Okay, at 75 beats per minute. So now we are going to test. That's right, test rudiments. Okay, so we had the Flam Taps, and I said our goal was to play them at 120. Well, let's see if we can play them at 110 first. Okay, we'll do 100. Okay, no problem. All right, no problem, no problem. 2, Flam Taps, 1, 2, ready, go. Okay, how did that feel? I think by now you should be somewhat there if you've been diligently working on your Flam Taps, and it doesn't have to be hours a day. It can just be a few minutes a day, periodically a few minute intervals, let's say that. You know, so like, you know, practice a few minutes in the morning or in the afternoon, and then maybe in the evening you might do it again. You know, just to get that muscle memory down. Once you got the muscle memory down, then you don't have to think about how to do them, just like any other rudiment. Let's go ahead and do 110. And here we go. For those who can keep up with 100, please join me. 2, 1, and 2, and here we go. And okay, not too bad. All right, now here we go for the test. 120 beats per minute. Ready? All right, 120, 2, 1 and 2, and here we go. And okay, how did you do? If you can't hang at 120, that's okay. just know that that's eventually where you want to get up to, okay? And of course you want to make them quite a bit faster, as I indicated a couple of weeks ago or so, because there's a lot of solos out there that require flam taps at 16 notes, which is 4 times as fast as the quarter note, twice as fast as the eighth note. We're going to get into 16 notes down the road, but you want to make sure that you're diligently trying to get at greater speeds. And you might experience a time to where you really grow and you're like, hey, you know what? Playing them at 120 is not too bad. Wait till you get about 150, 160 or 70 or 80. Then you're going to start running into some situations to where you might what's called plateau. And plateauing means that you don't feel like you're getting any faster, and you're trying, and it's just not happening. And that's totally normal. That's normal with me or anybody else in anything that they're doing or trying to get good at, is you find yourself having growth spurts and then it kind of levels off, and then another growth spurt and then it levels off, etc. So just keep in mind that don't get discouraged. You're your own best teacher, so make sure you give yourself a nice drum lesson and do deliberate practicing, working on the problem spots. Speaking of problem spots, anything in the solo that you've noticed that you get hung up on, the little reminders I gave to you, those are your problem spots, and that's what you want to work on, that transition. So let's give you an example here. Let's say, for instance, that I'm having a hard time with going from the first ending back to the pianissimo at measure 13. So I would go, and I'm going to start on measure 20, and I'm going to go back to the pianissimo. Okay, that's my problem spot. I can't get back there, right? But let's find out what it would be like if maybe you're trying to work on it. Okay, so I'm going to pretend like I mess up. Here we go. Measure 20. And 4. Oh, that's supposed to be pianissimo. Okay, so let me try this. And 4, and. Oh, now I know what I need to do mentally to prepare myself for that pianissimo, right? So, and 4, and. Okay, so immediately I get my hands down there and I'm ready for that pianissimo. That's just one example of maybe a problem spot that you might experience, but it could be anything. So if you're not reading something correctly, you want to go back over that little section and take it slower to where you understand, because let's say, for instance, 70% of the music you know how to play just fine. It's just that 30% that you need to work on. Now, typically what I used to do is I'd go from the beginning to the end and I need to make it perfect, and I didn't do it perfect, and I bang my head against the wall. No. You want to just take that 30% and really work on that, so that way when you take the rest of the 100%, it's just a matter of playing it. What if I had a problem spot of going from the measure 19, which is right before the first or second ending? What if I went there and instead of playing the second ending, I played the first, or I have a hard time of jumping over that first ending? I'm going to go ahead and play that last measure, that measure 19 at piano, and then of course pretend like I mess up. So without the metronome here. Here we go. Measure 19. 2, 1 and 2, and here I go. And 1 and 2. And. Oh. I have a hard time of make-believing I'm messing up here. But in the event that I couldn't, or I forgot to go to the second ending, instead of doing that whole repeat section, I'm going to go to that last measure before. And I'm going to go 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 4 and. That's one way to do it. If you did the whole thing, what ends up happening, even if you can play it correctly, and this goes back to our good days and bad days, and it's like, I did it yesterday, why can't I do it today? You can get overwhelmed. And like I said, I recommend practicing on those difficult points. Now let's talk about another area that might be a little bit different or weird, or might become a problem spot, which is some of these rhythms in here. Very interesting rhythms. So if we look at measure 23, and that's the last measure on the 5th line, I said that, it's a little different than some of the other rhythms. We got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, most of you might think, or I've seen this a lot with my students at least, is that whenever they see a quarter note, they think it's on the downbeat. It's not always on the downbeat or the 1, 2, 3, or 4. And we can see in this case scenario, we got the flam being on the downbeat of 1, which is an eighth note. And then after that's a quarter note. And then after that, now we're on the upbeat of and of 2 with that next eighth note. Okay, and then another eighth note, which is the downbeat of 3. And then on the and of 3, we have a quarter note, which takes up the and of 3 and the downbeat of 4, with ending with an eighth note in the last part of the measure. So I always kind of think about looking at that last note. You know, what is, if that last note's an eighth note, then I know there's something kind of weird rhythmically. So I want to make sure I get that right. So again, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and make sure you count. You have to count. You have to count. You have to count. Don't go by memory. It'll definitely help you in the long run. Now, maybe your question is, Adam, do you still count? Yeah, sometimes I do, you know, but for the most part, and you've read for a long time, you can start just reading this like you're reading a book. And we're going to talk about that. Next week, we're going to learn, I told you it wasn't too far away, 16th notes. Yeah, that's right, in our study number 7. So stay tuned for next week's episode. I'm Adam Tevlin. I'm your host. Thank you so much for joining me again. I hope you continue on. Don't give up. Remember, we're all in this together, and you're taking it at your own pace. And another thing to remember, always keep swinging those sticks. All right, take care.